My name is Viola Nuwaha, and as she has said, I'm a Smart Africa scholar and a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon University. Today, I have the pleasure of moderating a very energetic all-youth panel. As we have heard, in Africa today, we know for sure that youth are developing solutions to challenges that they face in society. And as such, we also realize that there is prospect of free movement of trade and people across the continent. So without wasting more of your time, allow me to invite to the stage the people that are at the heart of disrupting technology in Africa. First and foremost, I'd like to call Andrew Kinai to the stage. A round of applause from the audience, please. Followed by Joan Nkiriki. Followed by Davy Uwizera. Followed by Yvonne Wambui. And lastly, but not least, followed by Victor Akinwande. As you can see, this is a very energetic panel, but the question is, why do they deserve to be on the stage? Why should they be the ones to talk to us about digital disruption in Africa? First and foremost, Andrew Kinai is a software engineer in the Financial Inclusive Group at IBM Research Lab in Nairobi, Kenya, where he leads the user experience and design work. A round of applause for Andrew Kinai. Joan Nkiriki happens to be a Smart Africa scholar and a PhD student in engineering and public policy at Carnegie Mellon University. Maybe worth mentioning is that her recent research focuses on innovative energy systems in Africa. Yvonne Wambui, right over there, big smile Yvonne, is our data science lead and co-founder of Hepta Analytics, a startup that helps businesses in Africa leverage data to drive business growth in line with their corporate strategy. Davy Uwizera is the head of business intelligence analytics at Data Integrated, and he's also a PhD student at the African Center of Excellence in Data Science. Currently, Davy is working on transport optimization using GPS data and artificial intelligence. And of course, lastly but not least, Victor, it's not personal, is Victor Akinwande, who is currently a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon University Africa with research interest in applied machine learning. He has over 6 years experience in leading software development teams both in Rwanda and Nigeria. So just to bring to your attention, this is a very diverse panel from all over East Africa. Andrew Kinai is from Kenya, Joan Nkiriki is from Uganda, Davy Uwizera is from Rwanda, Yvonne Wambui is from Kenya, and Victor Akinwande is from Nigeria, and I'm Viola Nuwaha from Uganda. So my 2 cents are, get your notebooks out, because it's going to be a very invigorating discussion. So if you want anything you have to note down, please be very attentive, and let's delve into the discussion. Thank you very much. So Victor Akinwande, we talked about how you have experience in applied machine learning. And we know for a fact that the theme of this conference is accelerating Africa's digital market. So at the heart of accelerating a single digital market is building data-driven economies. Can you talk about how your applied machine learning research supports a data-driven economy?
Thank you. So a data-driven economy is one that data is at the core, is a core asset of that economy. And so the challenge is that data is unstructured. Raw data is unstructured. And you need tools, you need processes to be able to make sense of it. It's messy. And so that's where applied machine learning comes in, right? Because to extract value from to extract value from data, we need to be able to, apply things like machine learning, right? And so, for example, in the work that I've been doing, so I've been focused on building NLP for code mix context. And again, as I mentioned, to extract value from data.
Maybe, Victor, could you expound what NLP is for code mixed context? Because we would want the audience to follow with us.
Absolutely. So you see, in a data economy, those who can extract value from data and refine it are those who are going to make the money and those who are going to gain the value. And so how this ties into the NLP research that I've been doing is, so I said it's for code mix context. So across Africa, the use of language is often mixed in semi-formal or informal environments. And so, for example, in Kenya, the use of English language, for instance, is mixed with Swahili, which is the predominant native language. And really, the focus of my work has really been to how can we extend the natural language processing techniques that are currently the state of the art to work with the way English or language is used in general across the continent. And you see, as the data economy grows in importance, it's paramount that Africa takes the lead in applied machine learning research. And I have to say that this is actually beginning to happen. There's growing interest in machine learning research. So last year, July, the CMU-Africa Data Science Club organized the first artificial intelligence bootcamp in Rwanda. And within the first week of applications, we had over 500 developers across Kigali put in for the bootcamp. It just goes to show that machine learning is beginning to gain momentum across the continent. And I think that's a great thing for all of us.
Thank you. I believe Davy tends to agree with this very sentiment. So Davy Uwizera, whose work also uses artificial intelligence, how do you think advances in disciplines like data science and artificial intelligence can accelerate Africa's digital markets?
Okay, when you look at artificial intelligence and different technologies that are built on the top of artificial intelligence, you find that artificial intelligence touches on different areas. But now going to the digital market, which is our theme now, what's the difference between the digital market and the physical market that we already have? So if you look at that, one of the things that makes the digital market to lag behind is the trust and accountability. We see how people, flying to China to go there physically and buy stuff from there, right? Even though we have like e-commerce platforms that are still there, because there's that thing of lacking of trust and lacking of accountability. So I believe now, like if you look at what we're working on currently, we're using cognitive technologies, using AI in transport to bring accountability and optimization, linking that with GPS data. So if you can have something that you can trust, that it can assess for you very well, instead of going there physically, I believe this will contribute a lot to the digital market. And I believe artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to contribute to this very well.
All right, so we have looked at language, conversation, dialogue. We have looked at transport and trust. Yvonne, recently you and your company, your workmates, did something around the governance in Nairobi during the recently concluded election. So essentially, digital disruption is poised to happen in every sector of the economy. And like I said, governance is not left out. Can you talk about how the digital revolution can be harnessed in governance?
So governance is a huge topic to talk about, but I will narrow it down to three sectors: civic engagement, service delivery, and policies. And what us as a company we looked at is civic engagement. Gone are the days where we talk about physical engagement, where we have to go to our leaders and talk to them. Now we have the digital engagement, we have social media, we have email, we have phone calls, we have SMS. All this is data that is being delivered to and fro people. But how do we understand, how do we process this data? And that's the key thing that we're looking at. We tracked our elections in Kenya, or two of them, so to say. But so when during that time we were looking at the sentiments, what are people feeling during the whole process? And we tracked the conversation around the the candidates, the presidential candidates, and when we visualized it, we were able to to pinpoint the points of interest. When the elections were delivered, the results were delivered, during the court cases, when it was redone again, we were able to see it using how the different ways people were showing their sentiments. And this, we converted it into a product called Hisia, and now you can be able to track a person or a hashtag. We are tracking the Transform Africa hashtag, and the key word yesterday was mindset, and I believe we all remember mindset. So with that, you are able to, with people talking, all of us talking all at the same time, if you can analyze that and reduce it to words, I think we're going to go ahead. Service delivery is the second, and governments are actually having the e-government. You talk about taxes, we no longer have to queue for them. Passport, you no longer have to queue for them. Visa, you can get it online. This is how the digital revolution is actually disrupting Africa. And finally is policy, and I believe, I will not delve into it more because Joan is good in policy, but as the digital revolution is coming around, we also need policies. How do we tackle AI, as Davy was talking about? Policies have to be made around that. How do we tackle the 5G? How do we tackle IoT? All these policies have to be taken. And so with digital revolution, we are seeing the shakeup in governance, as it were.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. You've pretty much done my work. So Joan, the one that's really well-versed with policy, what are some of the areas of innovation in energy across the continent for Africa to partake in this digital revolution?
So if you'd allow me to, first of all, bring it into context. Energy is an enabler for the digital revolution. I believe we are all here because we accept the fact that digital disruption is going to transform Africa, but
Sure.
it needs to be powered. So power access cuts across, and in saying that, it means we have to go back to the drawing board and ask, are we going to increase the digital divide, or are we going to put in place solutions that allow for us to advance as we also address the challenges such as the fact that we have over 500 million people in Africa who don't have access to electricity. So putting that into context, when we talk about do we have opportunities for innovation, yes, we do, and they're already on the continent, such as off-grid technologies. There are several people doing solar standalone systems. People are trying to do small hydro, but innovation is not only in the technology side of things, it can also be in the economic models. So for the longest time, many of the renewable energy companies have worked with grants and with funding from, let's say, donors or non-profit organizations, let's say. But now we're looking at how do we go into social enterprise? Because if a financer pulls out, we don't want the project to end. How do we come up with economic models that allow for social impact, but also profitability? So that is my area of interest, and that's the focus I have for my research, energy access in Africa, but not just how we increase that access, how we make it an energy economy, almost creating a market, an energy market. And imagine the unprecedented opportunities if we combine off-grid technologies with digital financing. We would be almost opening Pandora's box in a good way though, yeah? Because we have so many opportunities, we have natural resources to harness, but how do we do it while driving profitability so it's self-financing? So those are the things that we have this conversation talking about energy and then bringing in digital evolution. So as Africa, how are we preparing ourselves to make sure that even those in the rural areas, over 70% of our population will have access to these services?
You talked about economic models. I'm sure people that are vested in entrepreneurship in the house are rather excited that we are not just thinking charity, we are actually thinking sustainability. And Kinai is better placed when it comes to financial technology. So we know for a fact financial technology like M-Pesa has been one of the success stories of the continent. When they mention Africa, they mention M-Pesa, they mention mobile money disruption. So what next if we are to accelerate the single digital market on the continent from a financial disruption perspective, Kinai?
So the first thing I would mention is the next step is how can we make this more data-driven? So how can we improve the data usage in terms of expanding the current strategy that you're trying to do with this single trade area? Now, if you look at mobile money, has been growing vastly in the past couple of years. I think the GSM had a statistic that in Africa we have 338 million mobile money accounts. And if you think about these customers or people who have these accounts, most of them, this is their only digital financial footprint. So maybe they don't have bank accounts or things like that. So how can we leverage this kind of data that they're always making all these transactions? Can we leverage this data to provide extra services to them? One thing you can see, several telcos are already doing this to some extent, of providing credit in terms of based on how much you've been sending in your mobile money, they can sort of give you some credit. But I think the next step that we should be looking at is now, let this not be just enclosed within the telcos. How can we expose this? So it could be other third parties or insurance companies. How can they leverage this data to provide more services to these people? So I think the key thing is how can we leverage all this data that's being generated by these mobile money accounts to provide extra services to the people?
Maybe, can I just, before you hand over the microphone, we've heard artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data science, and these seem like buzzwords. Yet actually at IBM, you recently announced the ever-fast blockchain-based microfinancing solution for SMEs in East Africa. And you are one of the people that spearheaded this movement. Why blockchain? Why Africa? Why now?
Okay, so I'll just take it back and just give some background. So for this project, we collaborated with Trigger Food. So they are a startup based in Nairobi, Kenya, and they are logistics firm. So what we are trying to do with them, we deployed a platform that was using blockchain and AI to provide financing for their customers. And the key thing with this was we are not giving cash money to their customers who are shopkeepers, but we're actually financing the orders that they're making through the platform. So just a background about Trigger Foods. It's a startup based in Nairobi. They have roughly around 3,000 shopkeepers in their network based in Nairobi. And what they do is they source farm produce, that's tomatoes, potatoes, and onions and things like that, from farmers around Kenya, and then deliver this to the shopkeepers based on the orders that have been made. So the current system that they were using is the orders are made, they're delivered, and it's all done through SMS. So what we did with our solution is plugged into the current system. So what we're trying to do is, based on the relationship that Trigger Foods has with these shopkeepers, so some of them have been customers for the past 2 years, and they've been buying goods. So we are leveraging that data, so the purchase history. So we are able to come up with a credit score to determine how good or how much money can such a shopkeeper be good for. Then the other aspect is we're using the blockchain to manage the entire process. So smart contracts to manage from the time an order is made. We offer, the shopkeepers get loan offers, so they can either pay in 4 days or 8 days. And then after that, once they accept the term that they would like, they're able to, the order is paid off for Trigger Foods, and then they're left to pay back this loan based on the terms that they picked. And all of this was being done through SMS. So when you look at some of these shopkeepers, some of them have very small shops. Others even operate from hand carts because they're selling this farm produce. So if you were to think about a bank or a financial institution trying to reach these small-scale shopkeepers, it's a bit difficult. So they might ask for things like collateral, or could be even audited accounts if they have formulated a company, and they don't have access to this. So with our solution, what you're trying to do is, can we use the data that's already available about this small-scale shops? So if you think about any SME, they probably have multiple suppliers, right? So what you're trying to do is, if you think about it, each supplier has a snapshot of how well this business is doing. Now, what you're trying to do is we're building a financial identity for this SME as a cumulative snapshot of all of the snapshots from these multiple suppliers, and it's built on the blockchain. So what you envision later on is now, once we have this financial identity for all of these SMEs, if a third party, could be a bank or insurance company or any other third party, would want to offer a service to this SME, they would request for consent, maybe to access some of this data. And it's very important that the SME is in control of this, so they have to give consent and say how much data should be given out and to who. So that's a very key thing, and all of this is built upon a blockchain platform. So that's the general idea of the project. In terms of what we observed during the pilot period, so we ran a 2-month pilot from December through to January this year. We observed 30% increase in the basket size. So these shopkeepers were ordering more. And what this shows is that they have the capacity to sell. It's just that they don't have enough financial money to be able to buy the stock that they need to sell. So what we envision for the next step is to expand this to more retailers, and the other aspect is to have more suppliers in this platform so that we can have a more...
Well, Andrew, you work for a very big company. IBM Research Lab is quite big, but we have startup founders like Yvonne. We have students that are vested in research, and ideally, for them to move forward, there has to be regulatory policies in place that support them. So, Joan, what role can the government and the private sector play to foster research in this area?
So I imagine some people might ask what business an engineer has discussing policy.
Policy, yes.
Yeah. CMU has given me an appreciation for the role that engineers have to play in policy development. As technology rapidly increases, our policies are going to have to be stable, technologically neutral, comprehensive, covering so many areas, and it's a challenge. So there's a need for people with the technical expertise to help with these decisions. And that's why I'm doing the research I'm doing in my PhD program, which is engineering and public policy. That nexus and that relationship on how we as engineers can come into the conversation, because ultimately, without harmonized and supportive policies, our disruptive innovations won't thrive. There's no point in us coming up with all these solutions and yet policy does not support them. How will our policies and our policy makers understand what we need for us to thrive? What kind of environment, enabling environment, must they create? That's why I'm very interested in engineering and public policy. So when you ask what role private sector and government has to play, part of the outcome of doing research in this area is the realization that there is low private sector participation in rural electrification programs.
And why is that so? Yeah.
Why exactly? We're on the same page. It's because it's a low profit margin. The people that you're trying to access and give the access don't have stable incomes. They're dependent on agriculture, which is seasonal. How do you then bring a private investor and tell them to put their money where they don't really see the profit margin? They actually see risk. So as engineers, for us, we get the support in research because we want to find out how can we come up with economic models that will allow for us to do this while still making profit. So our challenge right now is understanding why are there so many, for example in Uganda, why are there so many solar companies closing every day? Is it the funding that's the problem, or is it the operational sustainability? So private sector, yes, they have a role to play because a recent IEG report says we need almost 17 billion annually to be poured into rural electrification projects. That burden or responsibility can't fall on government alone.
Yes.
But then again, we don't expect handouts, just money, easy money. Someone comes and says, here's money for you to do a rural electrification project. So the support should come in such a way that we have to make a case for it. We have to come up with business models. Before we start the business, before we start the plans, we need to know, how am I going to attract the private sector participation? Policy can play a role in that, yes, but that means all the stakeholders have to be at the table as we develop the policies. We engineers inclusive, even the youth inclusive, because we need to understand the policies that are in place now, why are they there? How did they come about? If we're going to improve them, are we actually undoing something that was done for a reason? So all this is part of research. And that's the appreciation I would say I have for research. You make informed decisions before you jump the gun and say, here, let me innovate. What if people don't need what you're coming up with? So all this comes up with, government has the role, yes, to play because they are for the people, by the people, yes, they're for us. But private sector in itself can't make money from this. We researchers are very interested. I myself, I'll speak for myself though. I'm very interested in coming up with those models. How can it be profitable? There are very many frustrated renewable energy entrepreneurs. I have friends in the audience right now who are laughing because they've gone through it.
We'll probably hear from them more on their frustrations.
But basically what I'm saying in short, Viola, is speaking to your question of what's the role everyone has to play. Private sector needs to increase their participation, but we need to make the case for them to do so. We need to show them that we can reduce and minimize risk and uncertainty and increase the profit margin.
Speaking of involvement of each of the key players, yesterday His Excellency Paul Kagame mentioned that the business of politics is allowing the people you lead to thrive in whatever they do, and that includes business. So Yvonne is in the business of doing business. What opportunities and what challenges have you encountered doing the kind of work that you do at Hepta Analytics?
Our challenge is in data. As we can see here, everyone is talking about data, but in reality, are we actually doing anything?
Very good question. Do you
are
want
we
to
doing
pose it?
Anything? Because we are waiting for that one success story. We are waiting for the government to push. We are waiting for the big banks to do it, so that as entrepreneurs, we go ahead and we say, now because the government is doing it, we can now delve into it. And as a company, what you're trying to do is creating awareness, training people that data is not an afterthought. Data should be central of your business strategy. We are not supposed to create everything and then we say, now that I have all this data, what should I do about it? And that was a challenge for us. And when we were talking to organizations, they never thought about data. They never created infrastructure for it. The second thing that we see as a challenge is we are having an exponential growth in data.
Very true.
But do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the computational power to process it? And as Africa, are we ready for it? We're talking of digital revolution. We're talking about that single market.
Yes.
Can we process this data? How much does it cost for us to create a CPU or a GPU for it to process this data? And that is something that we should delve into. And I was really glad during yesterday's talk and yesterday's presentation of Smart Africa, we were actually thinking about it, the data centers in Africa and everything. And now when it comes to opportunity, everyone is talking about data. When I talk, this is data. When you're tweeting, that is data. When you're taking photographs, that is data. So there is opportunity in data. Davy was talking about data, when you're talking about an ecosystem where it's centralized, it's data informed. We are having digital revolution, at the same time, we are having data revolution. And that's an opportunity. It's a call for action for every one of us to understand that with all this data that's around, there is innovation around it. We're talking about optimization of our processes. We're talking about efficiency. So please come and trust the youth, and the youth create trust. Let people be able to trust you when it comes to dealing with their data.
Thank you, Yvonne. And I like that you're proposing a solution because, like I highlighted earlier, we are Africa's youth and we are finding solutions to the very problems that exist in our continent. And infrastructure is one of them. But also, we are brilliant minds. The people on the panel are doing artificial intelligence, machine learning. So, Victor, as a solution, as someone who thinks innovatively to address problems, to address problems we are facing in Africa, what creative ways do you propose we address these very problems?
I think fundamentally, as much as the conversation around advanced computing infrastructure on the continent is valid, I think fundamentally we still have a long way to go in collecting and actually storing data appropriately, to be honest. And I agree, we need creative ways to address this problem.
Yes.
And one of the more obvious ways, though, is open APIs. So an API, which stands for an application programming interface, provides a third party or any developer to access to an enterprise's data or unique services, right? So, I mean, open APIs are not just something that you do as a business to give away your data. They can actually, so as a creative way of addressing the data scarcity problem, the open APIs of a business can actually be a competitive edge. So if you're an enterprise here, I would encourage you to look to opening up your data and providing an open API. Because for one thing, I'll give an example of how that can be used. We can actually help you to identify new business segments or identify new use cases for your product or for your service. So that's one creative way of addressing the data scarcity challenge. Another way I think is worth mentioning really is, as Joan talked about, we not just in energy, across different other sectors, we need to start coming up with creative economic models that's going to support enterprises that are generating data to actually digitize their operations. Because one of the real challenges is, okay, for example, a parastatal or an agency that is in charge of providing access to weather information, ideally you'd want that agency to be able to create an API and give access to their data to the public. But one of the challenges is that really across Africa, we still need to automate, we still need to digitize several things. And I think once we start thinking about, okay, what's the economic model around this data that this enterprise is generating, and then maybe digitizing, the upfront cost of digitization can actually start to make sense. So I'm going to give an example. So I'm aware of a team in Rwanda here that is championing this idea of working with shop owners and giving out inventory management systems for free. So they're helping them automate their inventory management for free. But their business model is that now they can leverage that data and partner with third-party institutions that want to create new products or services out of that data. And all of a sudden, if we can take that kind of model and scale it across different industries, I think before you know it, we'll be able to address the issue of data scarcity. Another example I'm going to give, so in Nigeria, there's a startup that is rolling out digital solutions for the police force at zero cost to the government. I think and there's a whole economic model around that and how they make money. Fundamentally, what I'm trying to say is that once we start to think about the economic model around digitizing, around the data that is being generated, and then digitizing and the upfront cost, the investment needed to digitize can actually start to make sense.
So, Davy, you've had Yvonne and Victor propose solutions, and you're in the same field. You highlighted the benefits of artificial intelligence and data. Do these solutions speak to the barriers that you encounter? And if they don't, what barriers do you actually encounter so that we don't assume a one-size-fits-all model?
One of the barriers that we are experiencing in the industry is the shifting part. So if you go...
What do you mean by the shifting part?
That's what I'm going to explain. So if you're providing someone a solution, he has been doing it this way. Let's say we're talking about artificial intelligence, right? We're talking about natural language processing, talking about cognitive cameras. So if someone has been sitting somewhere, maybe looking at a video and saying that someone is entering, hit the button, someone has entered, hit the button, someone is going out. And you're saying that I'm going to develop a model that is going to, count if someone is getting in, if someone is getting out automatically. And then you tell this person that actually this model can even learn and get better, right? That's not something that's going to sync directly to someone. Of course, maybe to you it can sync because you have been studying that for 2 years, right? But for him, actually, it's a bit hard to transition in that stage. So if you look at, maybe give an example of what I've been working on. There's a model I've been developing for people counting in extreme condition. I talk about extreme condition is when people are against each other, moving forth and back, and you are able to count that. But it took me some time to even explain the team that this model can learn if it makes a mistake, if you teach it. So I got like 50 questions asking me, how can a model learn? So if that's one of the barriers that I look at. And actually that barrier, it's not only for the people that need solutions, but also for we that we are providing solutions. I mean, we need to be flexible. Flexible not in terms of technologies only, but flexible in terms of innovations. How do you think of something? If you think of something the same way for 1 year, 2 years, or for even other customers, even if they're in the same sector or in the same industry, there's a way that you have to be flexible in the way that you're providing these technologies. How do you tweak them? How do they match them? And as I finish, of course, we also have some other barriers in terms of skills, even though we are talking about data revolution, fourth industrial, this fourth generation of technologies. I think we also need to look at how we are producing great skills in terms of this. To be able to provide a model that works, let's say a model that predicts, that's not all, right? Yeah. There's even more than the model that is predicting something. I think as we go into this revolution, we also need to create skills and look at infrastructure, even as other people have been talking about that.
To get you right, we have a mindset issue, right? For the people that are adopting these very technologies. And I just want to do an audience hands up count. How many of us do online payments vis-a-vis going to the bank, withdrawing cash and walking to the counter and paying? Just by a show of hands. So this is almost 3/4 of the room, and I believe these are young people that are at the heart of digital disruption. There's still hope for us as a continent, Davy. I just wanted to confirm your fears. Recently, we had the buzz about the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. 44 heads of state signed this. And this means a lot for us as a continent, right? It will ease mobility of people and trade. So, Kinai, you talked about blockchain. You talked about financial inclusivity. What role can blockchain play in driving cross-border digital trade?
So I think I'll take you back to yesterday. I think Dr. Nkiriki asked a question to the audience. He asked how many people would go to a website or online and maybe look for a supplier, make an order, and then maybe even send a payment. And very few people actually raised their hands. And the key thing with that is trust. So we don't know if the person on the other end would be able to fulfill the order. Are they real, or do they even have the capacity? So just to tie this back, one thing I would say that would help with such situation is the blockchain can be applied to, like I mentioned before, in terms of financial identity. So creating these digital identities could be companies or people. And based off these identities, we can have this built up on many things. So if it's a supplier, so based on the past orders they've been making, or based on the goods that they've been producing, can we create such a trustable store that's decentralized that we can, off that we can go there and maybe verify if this supplier can actually make that. And I understand that there are there will be bad apples, but we cannot there are also some people who can be able to deliver. So it's good to have, blockchain can help us do things like that, creating these digital identities about organizations or people in terms of what they can do. The other thing that I would be cautious about is us applying blockchain in everything. So it's very important to think about that. So the use case, does it make sense? And like you mentioned, trade has many aspects to it. There's payments, there's a lot of this. So what we can think about is figure out the correct use cases to use this applied blockchain. The other thing that we could think of is that also happens is now creating enforceable contracts. So for example, if you go buy a good from someone, maybe you scanned, there's no formal contract, there's no formal, there's no way for you to go and maybe if they don't deliver or do anything, there's not so much you can do about that. So if a platform for this digital trade can be built on the blockchain, we could also build this into the smart contract. So once you get into a contract with me in this platform, if you deliver, that's good. If you don't deliver, if something doesn't happen right, there are consequences, and all this is built up into the system. I think that can help accelerate the digital trade.
Thank you very much. Like I said again, this is an all-youth panel, and it goes without saying that if we are going to invest in youth, there are better returns for Rwanda as a country and for Africa as a continent, because youth are at the heart of digital disruption for the continent. Worth mentioning also is the panelists are current students and alumni of Carnegie Mellon University. So let's first give a round of applause to our panelists. But prior to coming to Carnegie Mellon University Africa, we had different perspectives. We're probably not thinking blockchain, big data science, artificial intelligence. So quickly, Davy, Carnegie Mellon University has over 100 graduates at the moment. Most are working on the continent. As part of the alumni, what are your thoughts on what this bears for Rwanda and Africa as a continent?
It's a great thing. I mean, everyone can say it's a great thing. But what I would like to mention is this is a world-class program. And if you see young Africans that come to this program, and they can compete to world-class level, and we can graduate these guys. And the same guys that are going to Uber, that are going to Google, that are going to Facebook, they have also passed in this kind of program, and they're the ones that are producing the system that we are looking at currently, virtual reality, self-driving cars. So that shows that there is potential for Rwanda and Africa in the nearest future. We just need to see how we can actually now export these skills that are being produced from these institutions. And I believe that we are trying, we can actually push more, provide space for these guys and push them to, share skills. And that could bring great stuff, open Pandora box.
I think, Yvonne, you happen to be one of the people that have benefited from the diverse student community at Carnegie Mellon University Africa. How has that shaped your experience during your studies and even at Hepta Analytics as a company, for example?
So when you talk of diversity there, I look at it in three ways. Diversity in terms of gender, diversity in terms of nationality, and diversity in terms of skills. So in our company, we always laugh that the men are the minority. So when we are coming up with policies, we don't look at the traditional policies. We have to shift it, and how will we engage the men into it? And this is something we learned in CMU, where it's not about your gender, it's not about what you bring to the table. So it doesn't matter, as long as you're good at what you do, you'll just thrive. Second is diversity, and diversity in terms of nationality, where we have 10 different nationalities. And I actually realized I do not know anything about Africa. And for us to transform Africa, you need to know Africa. And that is something that CMU has actually built in us. So when you talk of West Africa being different from East Africa, we've seen it, it's different. And when you come up with solution, you have to take in mind that Africa is not a one size fit all. What works in Kenya does not work in Uganda, and will definitely not work in probably Nigeria. So what you have to keep in mind is that solutions have to be scalable. And finally, when it comes to skills, I think we take care of all the skills in our company. We have all the skills that are actually available in CMU: cybersecurity, entrepreneurship. When you talk of data science, we talk of social engineering, social development. We came and we saw all of them, and we saw the importance of the intersection. You cannot have data science without software development. We cannot have software development without entrepreneurship. They all have to come together, and in CMU, you see it live.
So we're trying to wrap up, and I believe the audience, like I said earlier, I hope you took down notes and you have questions to ask. So I'm going to open 5 minutes to receive questions from the audience, and then we can have some of the panelists respond. It's very fast. By show of hands, how many people have questions? Only one? Good.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Wase. I work with UN Women and I'm a youth advocate. I have two questions, one for Davy and another one for Yvonne. My question to Davy is, according to 2017 Newzoo Global Mobile Market Report, it says that 3 strongest and largest economy in Africa, I note, Nigeria, Egypt and South Africa, they are all not up to 37% of people owning smartphones. When you talk about digital market, when you look at most of the companies, you need an application. That means 70% or 60 or 65% use feature phones. How are we going to do that? Because also there's another report that says that the growth of smartphone using is getting lower. So before it was 40% increasing, now it's 7% increasing. So how are we going to take Jumuiya, how are you going to convince Jumuiya, for example, to have a system that feature phones can use to purchase goods? And also you talked about trust issues, the fact that I prefer to travel all the way to China rather than ordering something online. I personally have an experience of ordering online and never getting the delivery. Yeah, and then you say that artificial intelligence can help, machines can help and everything, but how can those machines hold accountable those business people? Yeah? My second question to Yvonne is how to ensure data privacy and security in regard to cybercrime increasing at a high level when we talk about digital market. I think she asked a question about how many people use cards paying and everything. But I think you also forgot to ask how many people have got disappointed. Oh. So you pay, and then, for example, the person you're paying will be like, if you're paying, let's say, in a restaurant, they're like, no, the receipt is not printed. And then you're like, okay, you can pay again. So you're like, yeah, I can pay again. But it can take you months to have your bank reimburse you that money.
Very
or
true.
to have at least that hotel agreeing that you did not make that transaction and going to your bank and convince them. It takes you a month. While it would have taken me just few hours to go to the bank and walk around with my money. Well, it's not safe, but at least how are we going to trust this digital market? And now lastly, to all the panelists, my question is, what do you all think about youth unemployment vis-a-vis to the digital market that we have now? Because the more we are engaging machines, that means less human being. Yeah? Less human beings. So if I have a company, for example, making mandazi, we all know mandazi, right? Mandazi, yes. Mandazis are donuts, yeah? If I have a company making mandazi, so I will have like a whole queue of 20 people to make that. So that the moment I will bring a machine to process that flour, that means 20 people out of their jobs, they will be on the street, yeah? How are we going to ensure youth employment with this digitalizing market going on? Thank you.
Thank you very much. To the panelists, that was a very thorough, thought-provoking questions. Before Davy and Yvonne can respond. You asked a very important question about youth and employment, and you posed it to all the panelists. So I'd like to start with Joan, then Victor, then Kinai, and we can return to Yvonne and Davy to the questions that are particularly addressed to them. So Joan, youth and employment.
So I'm laughing because in one of our classes, that was the final debate in the class, and it really had us separated. And everyone was like, no, jobs are going to go away. And others are like, no, jobs are going to actually stay. Jobs are going to shift from unskilled labor to skilled labor, which is why we are pushing for training our youth. Jobs, the nature of the job will change. So that means, how do you create more jobs? I think sometimes we look at, we are killing the jobs. No, we are increasing efficiency. And by increasing efficiency, it means maybe as the machines increase their efficiency, as people, we need to be challenged and increase our skills, our skill set, diversify your skill set. So the call is now, if in rural areas, you had so many people depending on going out into the farm to do their own farming, and you bring this huge machine that's going to do it and the whole family won't have what to do, teach someone how to fix the machine when it breaks down. Yep. Teach someone how to operate the machine. I mean, there's so much to say in that regard, but because I know time is limited, I would just push it back and say, it's a challenge, but we address it by saying, let us now also meet that challenge and say, we're going to change the way we look at things. We're going to shift our skill set.
Victor?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. I think fundamentally, it's not a zero-sum game. Like by digitizing or introducing automation to certain processes doesn't mean that okay, those who have been displaced would probably not be able to do something else, or the economy as a whole. So on the macro level, it's not a zero-sum game. And as Joan has mentioned, I think absolutely the jobs that are taken away by machines, the automation process itself is very likely to create a different segment, a different industry. And I mean, take for example, the IT industry, for instance, is now, in Nigeria, for instance, just a couple of years ago, almost everyone wanted to work in the banks because banks were making a lot of money. But today, everyone is going to IT, and part of the reason why IT was really successful, or one of the areas that IT has really been successful in Nigeria, is the banking industry. And so, I mean, yes, some jobs are going to be taken away, but it's not a zero-sum game. On a macro level, the economy is going to absorb. There are more jobs that's going to be introduced in the economy, and more people are going to be absorbed.
So, Kinai, financial inclusivity, youth and employment.
Okay, I'll just give a different point of view. So, I wouldn't say AI will replace people. So it's more augment. So it's actually augmented intelligence. So I think if you look at the case in point, Tesla currently, the issues they're having in the Model 3 production is just that they over-automated, and even now they're trying to see how can we bring more people. So when I think of this engaging machine, it's more like they're going to support us, not replace people. So that's what I would say.
So, Davy and Yvonne, I'd rather you address the questions addressed to you specifically. Do you want her to re-echo them? Oh, cool. So, Yvonne?
Last week we were at the Facebook Developer Conference, and security was key part of it. And what we'll talk about is that, again, during our development, when people are doing the whole market, is it the minimal viable product, and you want quick to market and everything. As the youth, we've all embraced that model, and we've ignored the security part of it. But so what we learned is that security has to be central. As much as data is central, security is central to all that. Security of the people, the data, and how you're handling their data. And one of them is to anonymize the data. Make sure that if I see something, I'll not be able to recognize who that person is. And it actually, and the third thing is to create trust, so that I should be able to trust that you as the youth who are developing solution, you'll not give away my data. So security should also be central. And one way is to create awareness. Were people actually aware in Africa about this, about privacy? When you tick that box, do you read the policy?
No.
When you're writing the policy, do you make it simple enough so that you the people actually realize what you're doing? And one of my partners in the company was also saying, we should also say, what exactly are you going to do with my data? Don't tell me that you're going to take my data, but what are you going to do with my data? So that when I tick that box, you actually agree that I'm going to use this data to do this and this and this. So awareness is key, and also is not only on the part of the developer, it's also the part of the user. When you tick that box, you say yes. So, and you'll be able to live with the consequence of that.
Davy, please,
Yes,
precisely.
As I'd like to mention a few things on the unemployment, and I talk about the questions that you asked me, two questions you asked me very quickly. So me, personally, I think that more jobs are actually going to be created. So I'll give you an example of, let's say, what we are working on in terms of transport optimization. If you look at economic activities, analysis that can come out, if you look at how many people are going to get out of the market, out of the banks, how you can use that to actually monitor GDP and different other metrics in different countries, that's a new job. That's actually a new whole startup, right? So if you look at the way technologies are going to help people in terms of the mood you enter in your house, when your smartwatch feels that you are sad, depending on the way your blood is flowing, they suggest you different music, they suggest you that you should probably go and see the doctor. That's a whole new startup. So I feel like that is going to open up so many opportunities. Only that probably it's may be shifting, as Joan said, from one skill level to skill level, but that's what we are working on as Africa, to teach our people and to make sure they are ready for that. Now, going back to the smartphones, the technology we're just talking about, they're not going to work only on smartphones. Even if you have a feature phone, you send a USSD code that you probably want to buy this and that, it's going to go to the server of the provider. And from there, the machine learning part can take it from there. Now, if you know Kasha, I don't know if you use Kasha. Kasha here in Rwanda, you use the USSD code for deliveries. You're not using my smartphone. You just send a code, and then they can analyze that, and okay, of course, then this guy maybe wants this and that, and then they can deliver to you. That's a feature phone. Now, talking about the way artificial intelligence is going to help, what we do at DIL, part of what we do at DIL, we also do hardware, so that it can match up with our AI and technologies. So if you see the way Alibaba works, currently there is a system that sits in the middle, whereby if you order something, they hold the money, right? And they deliver to you, and then you can say, okay, what was delivered to me is right, or blah, 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 blah. Then they can refund or not. But now, think about if you have another third-party system that is assessing using AI, because we are not going to have millions assessing. AI and can tell you, we have assessed that your product, 90% is what you're looking for, is not what you wish. That's going to build trust, and people can start to go and order actually with confidence, which is what we are lacking currently. I believe AI is going to contribute to that, and from there we can actually have so many benefits in that industry.
So, thank you very much, panelists. As you can tell, we are out of time, but briefly, if you promise 1 minute, give us closing remarks and speak to your area of expertise. What should the takeaway for the audience be from this panel discussion? Victor.
What I'm going to say is that I'm just going to wrap up by saying that innovation is bred when you bring people with great minds together and you put them within the right context. So in that regard, I'll just really, my key takeaway is that there's a lot of investment that needs to go into talent developing the talent. There's a lot that needs to go into linking research and academic networks to businesses to foster innovation. And I think there's a lot of potential on the continent to leverage technology for social good. And I think that's it.
Yvonne?
So I will sum it up by recalling the president of Rwanda when he said that as much as there's a lot of technology we're talking about, never forget the problem you're trying to solve. And that's our key problem. Don't talk about how can AI be used in Africa. Talk about how do we solve the health problem in Africa using the solutions that are available. And that is something that the youth should take into consideration. And number two is that we are not a one-size-fits-all in Africa. So as much as we are diverse and as much as we have similar problems, take into consideration our diversity and our diversity. Sometimes people look at it as a weakness, but it is
Our strength.
our strength.
I agree. Davy?
Yeah, I would say let's embrace these technologies and let's work together as youth to make sure that our dreams can come through these technologies. When you look at in the different revolutions that have been there in the world, most of them, Africa has been lagging behind.
Yes.
But I believe that this is a revolution that we can get right because it requires the skills of the mind, and we have them. We can actually catch up and do right stuff. So I believe that this is the right time that we can stand together and make it happen.
Joan, and lastly, Andrew.
So speaking from a researcher's perspective, we train more researchers, Africa will be able to harness its digital potential. That's a very important thing. So I think that the key takeaway is borrowed from what Victor has said. We need to train. We need to train our people, and the training needs to be, we need to look at online training. We need to look at how we can make it extensive, affordable, because like someone has mentioned, we're not trying to take people's jobs, but train them to adopt for this revolution, the digital revolution that we are approaching. But something has been on my mind, and I want to say it very quickly. I laugh because someone once said, if you make a system 100% secure, it will be unusable.
True.
So I just wanted to say
For me, I'll just say one thing. I think as you're trying to build solutions, let's make sure we engage the people you're building them for. I think that's very key. Let's not think about AI or blockchain or anything like that. I think the key thing should be the user. Who's going to use this? Is it going to be helpful? So that's it.
Thank you very much. And well, for me, from this overall discussion, as youth, I would like to re-echo what was said yesterday still, that Africa's position is now at the table and no longer at the menu. A friend reacted today and said, why don't we make our own table and invite them to the table to dine with us? And this is a call to the youth, to the industry, to academia. Let us be Africa's digital disruptors. Thank you very much.